In this example, we're going to take a look at, or start to take a look at user interfaces. Now, there's a lot to cover, and it's actually going to take several lessons for us to get through this one example. In this first section, we're going to do the basic setup of the project. So in our case, we're going to have an application that has multiple activities to it. And so today we're going to set up all of those activities and configure them properly so they all work together, and that'll be our first exercise. So I've already created a project called BA User Interfaces, and as you can see, it has this single activity main user interface, and of course our basic default main activity class. I'm going to close that up, and what I'm going to do next is create 9 additional classes, each one for a different screen that we're going to work with. So I'm going to do that by clicking on the new class option. First one is going to be called Boolean Controls Example. They all extend from Android App Activity. Okay, and I'm going to continue. Button example. Frame layout. Gallery. Linear layout. Spinner. Table. Text. And last but not least, web. Okay, so that's done. The next thing we want to do is create 9 layouts. Again, one for each one of our activities. This I'm going to handle a little bit differently. I'm going to copy this layout and just continue to paste it. So first one's going to be called Activity Boolean Examples XML. Button example XML. Frame layout example XML. Gallery. And so right now these are just placeholders. We're going to modify them all, and they'll be all very different, even though right now they're getting that start that basically makes them almost identical. Linear layout example. Spinner. Table layout. Text example. And web example. So we've got all of the layouts for our class files here. So the class files themselves do need the basic onCreate method in place. So what I'm going to do is copy it from my main activity and paste it into the rest of them. So we're just going to swipe this one, open up Boolean, paste it, and change that to the appropriate layout. This will be Boolean, saved, buttons, button example, frame layout example, gallery example, linear layout example, spinner example, table layout, text example, and web example. Okay, so we're almost there. I'm going to close all these up. This is why I like to close them all up ahead of time. This gets too confusing, too many things open. Okay, and before we can do anything with these guys, we need to make sure they're also in the Android manifest. So to add them to the manifest, I'm just going to copy and paste. I'm not going to do it manually. And there they are. So all of the different layouts that we just created are now in place in the manifest. Notice that the linear layout example has also a theme specified, and more on this when we talk about that particular page. And so we're almost there. The next thing we're going to do is define the list view, which is how our application is going to interact. So I'm going to open up the main activity here and change the main activity to use a list view, or really a list activity. And then we're going to define a couple of quick things here to make this work the way we want. So I'm going to get rid of menu. I'm going to get rid of activity since we're now using list activity. I'm going to define my set of options. Okay, and I'll put them all here. I think I'll copy and paste those. Okay, it's just a nice habit that I have. Well, I don't know if it's nice. It's a habit that I have. I'd like to know what element I am actually working with. So these comments just provide the identifiers 0 through n of the selected element. So you can see these are the options that will be available in our list view. And now let's make that list view appear on the screen. So you've seen this line of code before. This is a array adapter that basically combines a predefined Android XML layout with the elements in our array and pushes all of those elements out to a list view text box. So or really view. The last thing we need here is the on list item click event listener. Without it, we won't be able to interact with the list view itself. So I'm going to paste that in because it's a lot of code and just import my missing references. Okay, save that. And so all we're doing here is we have a switch statement that starts with 0 and goes to 8. This matches our array. And each one basically calls a new intent. And an intent is a call to a new activity. So in our case, you can see if we hit 0, that means the user selected linear layouts and scroll views. And that's the example that we're going to show on the screen. And so on. So you can see this code is very repetitive, the same for each one of our options. And that's all that we need to do in order to implement the code for a list view. Let's add the list view itself over to our interface, which right now doesn't look quite like it. And we're going to do that through XML. Just seems easier since it's very little code that we have to work with. Okay, now one key here is that we need to give it a specific ID, and that is @+ID/Android:list. That means it's just going to by default work with this setup that we have here in our list activity. So all is good. We can now actually run our application and see what happens. Assuming we have all of our activities properly defined in the XML file, assuming we attach the correct interface to each of our set content views in each one of these classes, our application should work. Now, in terms of what we'll see isn't going to be dramatic, but we should be able to have a multi-user application up and running. Okay, and here's our list view. So you can see the idea here is we can add more elements to this, and they're basically going to become part of this scrollable list. Now, at the same time, we can click on things. So if I click on linear layout, you can see that it opened up a new view for me. It still says hello world. You can see that the action bar is missing, and that's because we did specify that here in the Android manifest. We said we want this particular activity to not have a title bar. So let's go back to the code. Now I'm going to use back button to return to my previous screen. The rest of them should return exactly the same view, since they're all copies of the same identical XML file. But as you can see, we can navigate from one screen to the next fairly easily. And so that is part one of our application. So today we created a multi-activity app, and we configured it to work. So in the next section, we're going to start looking at the linear layout and other components that we can define examples for.